Do vegans get enough protein?
Do you know what they can? It's perfectly possible to meet your protein requirements on a vegan diet, but it's all about understanding.
Today we have a nutritionist because I want to learn everything about food. Ciao Bella. How are you? Are you doing?
Good.
Excited?
Yeah.
Don't be. DayOff was born from the simple idea of a bar conversation during a day off, with the goal to understand great people, the choices they've made, and their mindset. And with this approach, we are able to split the person from the personality. If you do enjoy the work we're doing here, hit the subscribe button and become part of the DayOff podcast community. It's the $1 million question. Do vegans actually get enough protein? Yes, no, who knows? Or what is the difference between processed and ultra-processed food? Or what are the negative effects of alcohol on our system? Well, these and much more we discussed together with Sandra, a professional nutritionist. Sandra, welcome to your day off.
Thank you.
Are you happy to be here?
I am. Yeah, very excited.
I think nutrition is such a massive topic, often misunderstood, and there are a few things I want to understand from you, who have studied nutrition. Now, nutrition is a very big umbrella, right? And it covers lots of different subtopics, I would say. And I know when you study to be a nutritionist, you then can decide to get specialized in specific parts of nutrition. What did you specialize in exactly?
My degrees, I've got a bachelor in public health nutrition, which is focused more on the preventative side of things, and my master is in human nutrition. So that actually encompassed a lot of different subjects. I did quite a lot of varied things within that, including things like sports nutrition, nutrition for kids and adolescents. And also did a research project in the end there focused on ultra-processed foods and food labeling. And
Interesting.
yeah, it's one of my favorite topics to talk about.
Tell me if this is another myth or it's actually correct. That, well, some people say our gut is like our second brain, and our brain and our gut are directly connected with each other, meaning our mood can affect our gut health and vice versa.
Yeah. So
What's the deal there?
that is, yeah. So it's called the gut-brain axis, is known as. So the
Gut-brain
gut-brain axis. So they're communicating with each other. And there are a few different pathways and different ways that happens. So, for example, the gut has its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system. So that is one of the ways that this communication happens. The microbes in the gut, so there's bacteria,
enzymes,
virus, and all these different microbes there that when they digest the food particles that make it all the way down to the large intestine. So that's things like fiber, for example, which they love. They ferment that, and then as a byproduct, they make all these different substances that the body uses, and some of those are actually little messenger chemicals that actually also participate in this communication with the brain. And as you mentioned, that they can affect each other. So the gut can affect the brain function, but also mental health. So there's actually a really interesting study. It was basically a groundbreaking study that I think it was published in 2017 called the SMILES trial, and that was kind of the first of its kind, where they did a randomized controlled trial of a couple of groups of participants. One of them, the control group, they both groups had, I think it was moderate to severe depression, I think, and they wanted to see how diet affected that. They basically the control group, they got social support, so I guess talking therapy or support with somebody, and the other intervention group, they did dietary changes, and they actually found that there was a really significant improvement in the symptoms in the group that had the dietary changes, that I think it was about 32% or so went into remission of symptoms, which was roughly on par with what they expected to see with medication, I think. So, and a few kind of key things there were that the diet that they used, they called it a modified Mediterranean diet, so ModiMed diet. So they kind of based it on the Mediterranean diet, but adapted it a little bit to kind of suit the Australian conditions. It was carried out in Australia.
So the study was in Australia by an Australian entity, or
It's actually, yeah, it's through a research center called the Food and Mood Center in Melbourne.
right?
It's actually connected to the same university where I took my master's degree. Um, and they,
How crazy is that?
yeah, it's amazing. Like, and from that, there's been a lot of, follow-on research and looking into how diet can actually impact mental
Did
health.
the study say what these people were consuming?
It
As-
does, yeah. In the research paper, it actually gives details.
You remember it?
It's quite details.
Okay, all right.
But basically, they kind of based it on the Mediterranean diet pyramid, the same sorts of foods to include, and I think they gave like a specific amount of nuts that they should include.
No,
each
no.
day
I
in
mean,
their something.
not. We assume that obviously, and now actually we don't assume. We know that food affects our mental state, right? So what I was asking about, what these people were consuming before
Oh yeah,
they
yeah.
got
Sorry.
fixed diet for them.
Yeah.
Because
So
I want to understand. Okay, so what are the foods that actually, in big amounts, can actually affect your mental health?
that is, the other side. I was, I didn't quite get to that.
You were
But
already.
I was onto the first part of the diet thing. So yeah, the number one prong of this, the effects that they saw was like giving them, instructions to follow this ModiMed diet, and basing it on that. But the other thing was that they were limiting the amounts of junk foods or ultra processed foods that they were consuming. Also things I think like alcohol and stuff like that. They had a limit on how much they should be consuming of that too.
Meaning
So
they were consuming a bit too much alcohol, a bit too much junk food before.
perhaps, yeah. So, when they're looking at the kinds of what they think is behind these, things that might be making mental health poorer, or also, when you're making these changes, what might be improving it. It's difficult to know whether it is the junk foods or the ultra processed foods, the alcohol, all those kind of things, or if it was that they were deficient in something that they weren't getting from that they then got from the new diet that they were asked to follow, or it's a combination of both of those things by
Yeah,
improving the
I don't
diet.
think we
reducing
can
the
assume that
substance.
one automatically excludes the other, right?
Yeah,
So
there's
that they could be both scenarios.
Yeah,
both
and it
things.
likely is, probably a combination of a lot of things. It's something that is quite common in nutrition. It's very difficult to know exactly all the mechanisms behind everything because, especially when it comes to food, there's so many things in a natural piece of food that are all working together, all these different components, that once we start to isolate them out, we might be losing some of that effect. And it's, the sort of thing that, it's better to have the whole food than it is to have all these kind of supplements and this all these isolated things, because we don't know if we're getting the full effect, then we might be missing out on some of the effect that the full package has in its state. So
Can you give me an example? Because I want to understand exactly how these two things are connected, and how does what I eat exactly affect my mental state exactly? Because, well, I read that sugar does, the consumption of sugar, especially refined sugar, gives you a certain dose of, please correct me if I'm wrong, dopamine or serotonin or some other happiness hormones, whatever. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but and then I read that if your levels of serotonin are high every day, high, then at some point you stop consuming that substance, and then it drops, right? And all of a sudden you feel sad and you can't sleep, and because you're addicted to a certain, your body adapts, right? And your brain adapts. So how does that work exactly on a brain level?
Mm, that sort of side of thing, it's kind of quite disputed, the effect, whether, I guess you're kind of getting into the aspect of whether certain foods can be addictive and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's quite disputed. There are some studies that are showing that perhaps certain foods, and this is getting more in towards the ultra processed foods discussion,
Okay.
that they're kind of engineered to set off things and make us want to eat more and kind of appeal to the reward center and that sort of thing. But when it comes to the effects, like how foods are having effect on the brain and mental health, that is mainly through the gut. We call it gut microbiota. So that's the community of all those microbes that are living in the gut. And they're the ones that are digesting fiber and food particles and things and producing all these different chemicals and doing different things in the body. There are some of those that regulate appetite. And so if we get enough of those, then it, is regulating whether we're hungry or not. Or, if we're not getting enough of those, then it might not be giving us the signals that we're full, and so that we're still eating more when we're not actually consuming the right types of foods. And also other ones that are getting sent up to the brain to regulate mood and as you mentioned, serotonin, and some of the there's actually I think it's about 90% of the body's serotonin that is produced in the gut as well. So it's
90.
yeah, very important to look after the gut. So it's really important. Yeah, the gut is just overall important for everything. And to kind of put it in that terms, at home we talk a lot about the good bugs and bad bugs. That's how I explain it to my son, so he
All right.
understands the little bugs that are in his tummy, as we call it. And that we have both the good guys and the bad guys in there at all times. But the main thing is that we want to make sure that we have mostly good guys and that there are only, a couple of the little bad guys there, so that the good guys are there to keep them in check. They make sure that they don't get out of control and create havoc. And that's, when things can start to go wrong. And the way that we do that is by feeding the good bugs the foods that they like. So that is mainly lots of plant foods, because they thrive on the fiber, and in particular a special type of fiber called prebiotic fiber that's found in certain foods like onions, garlic, leek. There's quite a few different ones, and some legumes like chickpeas and things like that. So by feeding them those kind of foods, that means that they'll thrive, they'll stay alive, getting plenty of different types of plant foods as well, because they don't all eat the same thing. So there's different bacteria in there that like different types of plants. So having different variation of plant foods also makes sure that we've got plenty of different types, which is what is generally thought to be most beneficial. We don't have an exact blueprint for a healthy gut, and it's likely very different from person to person anyway. But having as many different types as possible is seen to be beneficial.
But we know what not to eat as well.
Yeah,
That
that's
we
the
know.
other side of it.
Yeah.
If we don't eat enough of those plant foods, and then we start eating, the high sugar, ultra processed foods, then we're not feeding the good guys. So there'll be less of them. They'll reduce in numbers. And then we're leaving more room for the bad guys to flourish and also get out of control. And we're feeding them the stuff that they like by feeding them the wrong, the unhealthy foods, I guess.
Yes.
So yeah.
Sandra, there is so many things I want to talk about with you actually.
Yeah.
So earlier, about half an hour ago or so, we were talking about, before we started this, we were talking about again gut brain connection, and you said also, I said, what you eat can affect your mental health because they're connected, and then you said, and it's also the other way around.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
Now, what did you mean by that?
The communication goes both ways. So, the brain can impact gut function. It regulates gut function, so how things work down there, everything moving along, but also there, in particular, in people who have gut conditions. So one in particular that comes up a lot in the literature is irritable bowel syndrome. There's a connection there that quite often people who have irritable bowel syndrome and experience uncomfortable gut symptoms can actually get worse if they are under stress or have anxiety, or so that we actually know that that can impact gut function and make gut symptoms worse. Or even just the average person who may not necessarily have a gut condition. Sometimes you might feel, if you're stressed or anxious about something, you can start to feel, a little bit dodgy in the gut, or the, butterflies in the stomach sort of feeling. So that is the brain impacting the gut and the
This
digestive
is
system.
probably not your area of expertise, but is there a way we can improve that?
Yes. Yeah.
Please tell me.
Well, I mean, obviously, if it's a serious mental health condition, then you might need some additional help on the side there. Which it's when we spoke about that study before, it's not to say that we should forego, traditional treatments and things like that for mental health. That they do promote that's what they call an adjunct treatment. So that's alongside the traditional treatment. So you can't just use diet alone. But if it's something you're just a bit stressed or anxious, then reducing stress levels, doing a little bit of physical activity or something that calms you down, some calming activity, things like yoga, meditation, even breathing exercises. Or if there's something else that you find relaxing, like, I don't know, journaling or painting, reading, whatever it is, if you find something that can relax you down, and then, that can actually help to reduce gut symptoms. And that's actually something that is also often recommended to people with, gut conditions that experience the worsening when they have stress and anxiety and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
I understand why you chose to study this. Super fascinating.
It is, yeah.
Because once you get nerdy about it, then it can help you live a better life. When it comes to living a better life, so a big problem with people who try to who visit professionals like yourself, and then they get a written plan, I guess, because most of them get a written plan, right?
It varies a bit, to be honest.
Yeah.
Some people want a plan, some people don't, and so it's
Well,
everybody's different.
let's say for the ones who do get a plan, right? Not written, but plan.
Yeah.
They start they start really well a few weeks, right? And then they just give up. And that's why, the the plan doesn't work, because then you're lacking consistency,
Mm.
right? Have you ever thought why people just stop and get lazy after a while? What's the reason? I'm one of them, by the way.
Yeah. It's well, it's not necessarily laziness. It's
No.
really important to understand that it's not always just about the food. Obviously, that is a part of it. But often, when people come to me, they might already have a lot of knowledge from before, especially if it's somebody that has come for weight loss or something like that. They've often been sent to a lot of different places and been through a lot of journeys already before. Or it might be somebody that's been tried a lot of different types of diets and things like that. But it's about understanding, firstly, that side of things, like what we shouldn't be eating, or what we need to be eating for good health. But if we kind of break it down, like I think most people kind of understand that if we're eating lots of cookies and chocolates and things like that, they're probably not the best things to have all the time for good health, and that we need to be eating, more vegetables, fruits, things like that for better health. But it's the putting it into practice, as you said, is the kind of that's where things start to get a bit tricky. And it's Yeah, partially the behavioral side of things, understanding what is actually a barrier. That's going to be obviously very individual, but it might also be something that is quite uh, difficult to uncover. For some people, behavior change can be really difficult if, for example, they have had something back in their childhood or some sort of trauma that has, sat really fast back then. And
I'm
has
addicted to carbs, for example. I was. I'm trying to stop now. No, but seriously, and it's at some point. Well, I was. It was quite serious because I couldn't stop eating carbs. Even when I realized I was addicted to carbs,
Mhm.
when starch, so complex carbohydrates, they give you a big belly, right? And I was trying to I didn't like myself, so I was working out and I was like, why is this belly not going down? And then I started learning all about complex carbohydrates, starch, and how your body has to spend a bit more time and energy in breaking down the starch because it's a
Mhm.
complex carbohydrate.
Mhm.
And then I was like, no man, I'm gonna stop now. Enough. And I went on for like a week. That's the maximum I ever gone. And then without bread and pasta, and I think I even removed rice or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't. I had a mental barrier. I had to I had to make myself a plate of spaghetti.
Yeah. That
So
must be very hard to you.
it
When
is
you're
really hard.
Italian.
It is really, yeah, it was. And then I realized, I was like, I have a problem here. I can't stop with this. What would be the advice you would give to someone like me, actually?
I think it's yeah, about finding out what your personal barriers are. If you find that there's a particular situation where you find it difficult to that you often go for that food, and you see that there's a pattern that happens, then you can try and already have a tactic in place to overcome that. So for example, one that often comes up is people with snacking on, sweets or chocolates or things like that in the evening when they're watching TV. And that is something that's quite complex because there's a few different things to look at there. For one, it's probably become a habit if it's something that you do regularly. But the other thing is that it's connected with a specific activity. So if you're sitting on the sofa watching the TV, it's connected. And when you sit down to watch TV, you're like, okay, I'm missing something if you don't have that, snack there that you normally have all the time. And so your brain is thinking, oh, I need that because we normally do these things together. Um, so in those sorts of situations, then if you see that that's a pattern and a habit is formed, then you need to try and break
Then,
that by doing something completely
yeah.
different for a while.
So if you say every time I come back from work, I sit on a couch and watch TV and I have popcorn,
Yeah.
for example,
Mm.
and I want to stop doing that, then
You need to
just
maybe
not having popcorn is probably not good enough. You have to change the habit if you really can't stop.
probably for
Why?
a period in any case to try and it's either, another tactic is that you could have a different snack if you want to have a different option there. If you want to swap out your popcorn for something else, then have that more readily available. Make it easier for yourself to choose that by having something already pre-prepared. So when you go to, your popcorn drawer or wherever you like to keep it, you've got some sort of other snack there readily prepared that you can just grab. Because that's another, one of like there's so many different factors that affect our food choices. And in addition to different things like things like lack of sleep and those sorts of things that affect hormones and affect our hunger and food choices there's also food environment, which can be, the food environment on a bigger scale, like what's actually available in the shops and things like that we're getting marketed, or the less healthy options, but also your own personal food environment at home. What have you got around you that is the easiest thing for you to choose to eat? If you know that you're coming home from work and you're really tired and can't be bothered making something, and you're just going to grab whatever is the quickest, easiest snack available, then that's going to happen. So try and prepare for it. When you have a little bit of time on your day off, then you could, pre-prepare some snacks in
While
advance
watching the podcast, possibly.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. you know, if
So,
it's,
so it's habits, right?
there's
It's
habits and
habits
being
and
prepared and yeah.
interesting.
Mm.
Do you know who has very bad habits?
Who?
Bartenders.
Aha, yes.
Now, because bartenders work, they normally start their shift at 3 o'clock in the afternoon
Mm-hmm.
until 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And normally, what you do is that you are in an environment filled with people having fun. Sometimes you have a drink yourself. Very often you skip dinner, right? And then what happens is that when you go home, you had, especially if it's a Saturday, let's say after shift, you have a few beers. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. You have a few beers because you had a very long day, right? So you have a few beers, a couple of martinis. Then you go home. You go and you're really hungry. Like, oh God, I didn't eat anything. And then you start eating burgers and processed, ultra processed. I want to know what the difference is between these two in a minute. But and then it's a cliche to say yes, but you shouldn't skip dinner. It's very important. But in reality, it's one thing is to say it and one thing is to do it, right? So there are a few things I want to understand here. One thing is, of course, the difference between processed and ultra processed food, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what bartenders most of the times eat, right? Whatever they can buy at 7-Eleven at 2 o'clock in the morning or burgers and whatever. Also, what are the negative effects alcohol has on your system,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you are empty stomach?
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything else? No, let's start with those.
Okay, so if we start with the processed, ultra processed thing,
Yes.
I think that's a really important thing to define because it is so confusing. There's a lot of confusion out there. Even some, nutrition experts seem to misunderstand the difference between these things, which is, I think it's often sometimes intentional to try and confuse the argument because there's a lot of us that are trying to push for more restrictions around, and more advice to be included in official guidelines and stuff about reducing intake of ultra processed foods since there's just more and more research coming out showing that they're linked with negative health outcomes. So but to try and explain it, basically one of the most common ways that's used to define ultra processed foods is what's called the Nova food classification system, which was developed by a group of researchers in Brazil. And it kind of defines food, it categorizes foods into four categories. So there's, unprocessed or minimally processed foods. So that's your, raw natural foods or ones that have had very little done to them. They've got another category, which is they call it processed culinary ingredients. So that's things like, salt and oil and basically just ingredients that you add to foods.
Seasoning.
Yeah, those kind of things. And then you've got processed foods. And then the fourth group is ultra processed foods. And it's those two groups that kind of get a bit confused. And processed foods are basically when you do something to a food that could be, for example, when you're cooking your food at home, then you've processed it essentially. There are also, foods in the store that are processed when we make milk into cheese or yogurt or something like that.
That's
That's
processed.
processed.
Right.
And processed foods can also include certain additives, but that is preservatives and also antioxidants. And they basically, it's the reason behind those additives that it's important because those ones are to make the food safe for us to eat. So by preserving the shelf life so that they don't, go moldy or go off or something like that and become dangerous for us to eat. The same with the antioxidants as well, that kind of preserves the food and stops bacterial growth and that sort of thing as well. So that, there's nothing wrong with processed foods. It's very difficult to live without them. And, there's a lot of yummy processed foods as well, cheeses and things like that, or maybe not for you.
Not for me.
No, but
Well, the vegan cheese for me.
yeah, there you go.
Still processed.
Yeah. But
so could a piece of steak or a chicken be processed, or is that ultra processed? How does that work?
piece of chicken estate, if you haven't done anything to it, then it's normally in the first category. So minimally processed or
So the ones I find in a supermarket.
just if it's in a packet with nothing on it, it's it's not processed.
Okay.
It's once we start doing something with it, then it
All right.
starts to become processed or ultra processed. So when we look at ultra processed, there's kind of several different aspects that define whether it's ultra processed or not. If we start off by looking at the additives again, so as I said, there were a couple of different types of additives that can be added into foods that don't necessarily make them ultra processed. It's as long as they have as a purpose just to make the food safe for us to eat. In Norway here, those are generally the ones that start with E2 something something and E3 something something. So that's the preservatives and antioxidants. But the other additives outside of those groups, they are what we refer to as cosmetic additives. They're generally added to a food for cosmetic purposes to make them,
Better.
look good, taste good, have a good consistency, have a good color, smell, whatever, basically make it more appealing to us and also, more likable when we eat
I
it.
heard they were doing this to salmon.
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
heard that
To change
sometimes they can.
change its color and make it look more appealing, and
So that
also
is
the layers of fat you find.
probably one of the it's basically kind of a bit of a scale within the category as well. So some foods, like that, for example, are probably at the lower end of the scale. They're not so ultra processed as some other foods you can get at the other end of the scale. I've seen some shocking examples of ones, like when I was doing my research project, or even just, for example, I had a look at the ingredients list for a cake made in a store, and it had, like between 15, 20 different cosmetic additives in the thing. And it's just, just a row of E numbers of all different sorts and types. It's like,
So that's some good advice, actually. What did you say? E what?
the E numbers, so the ones that are E200 to 299 and the
But it
3.
starts with E,
Yeah.
usually.
That's all, but having said that, sometimes the additives can be in there just with their actual name, but generally
What should we look out for?
what I would advise is looking for those E numbers. Basically, if you see something that's a preservative or an antioxidant, then that's not generally something you need to be worried about, or if it has one of those E2, E3 numbers. If it's something else, or if it's a whole bunch of random ingredients that are things that you are probably not likely to be using at home, say, for example, you're baking a cake at home. You know what ingredients you would normally have at home to make a cake. But the ones that you buy in the store, they need to sit there, have a long shelf life, be all nice and soft and moist and squishy and whatever. So they have to have all these extra things in them to make them be able to stay there for that amount of time. So that's when all these extra cosmetic additives come in. Another aspect of it as well is the actual process that it goes through. So as we talked about the processed foods, they go through processes, but that doesn't change the structure of the food ingredients in a huge way, whereas ultra-processed foods are quite often gone through several different industrial processes, which can sometimes considerably break down the cells in the food. And like we talked about a little earlier with the blood sugar example, if you're breaking down those plant cells quite considerably, then those nutrients are more available for the body to take them up very quickly and affect things like blood sugar, but also then that affects how full you feel. So you won't feel as full because your body doesn't have to work as hard to break that down. It doesn't have, for example, fiber that's helping you to feel full. And another follow-on effect of that is for the gut bacteria, because they're not getting all that fiber and nutrients down in the gut because everything is already been broken down and taken up earlier on. So it's pretty negative for them as well.
I'm getting anxious right now.
Yeah. And,
No.
the other aspect, I mean, There's also the official definition of ultra-processed foods, I think also includes a bit about the heavy marketing and that sort of thing around ultra-processed foods. But in general, it's also important to have a little bit of a think about the purpose. So the purpose of ultra-processed foods, quite often, these are foods that are using very little whole food ingredients, so they're quite cheap to make for the manufacturers. They are putting things in them that are designed to make us like them more and to effectively overeat them. So that means that we're going to
And
want,
create an addiction in us.
and basically we're repeat customers. We're buying more, we're eating more. So it's at the end of the day effectively about profit.
Is refined sugar ultra processed or processed? Ultra processed, as I understand.
Sugar would come up
Refined.
that sugar in itself as an ingredient, so just normal table sugar, that comes into that second group. But then there are all sorts of other types of sugars that are, processed and isolated. Like, for example, things like the high fructose corn syrup that's sometimes, I don't think you find it in so many products here, but for example, in the US, they use
Everywhere.
it quite a lot. Yeah. So things like that is a ultra processed, ingredient.
Right.
So yeah.
So just to wrap it up, let's repeat it one more time. What are the things we should look out for then?
So
E-numbers?
the E-numbers you can check out for those to
Yeah.
see.
Anything else?
Just looking at the ingredients and trying to have a bit of an idea if that's something that you would normally use to make that
If
product
something
yourself at
says
home.
salt, seed oil, I don't know. I'm thinking now. And something
if
else.
it's, if it's a cake and it's got flour, eggs, sugar, butter, whatever, then
Then you're good to go.
that's pretty much the same as what you would use at
At
home.
home, yes.
If it's got a book worth of ingredients after it, then and all these things that
Think about it before you buy it.
perhaps like it may be a sign that that's ultra processed. Generally, if it includes at least one of those cosmetic additives, then it's technically an ultra processed food. And it's kind of more difficult to know about the processes. We can't tell from a package what kind of process something's been through. So the ingredients is kind of the easiest way to try
Let's
and
say a fast food burger.
yeah, those I don't
Just
have
say it for what it is.
Generally, it's probably going to be ultra processed.
Okay.
And
Fries,
the same.
kebab.
Yeah, generally, if it's a standard kebab from a kebab shop here, probably a lot of the ingredients in it is going to be ultra processed. So
Okay.
it's if you're buying something like that from somewhere, it's very difficult to know exactly what they've put into
For
it
sure.
and what they've done to it, but you can kind of make
You
a
can
bit
guess.
of a guesstimate from the type of
Yeah, also because it's not like when they sell it to you, there is a label at the back that says we used this, and this.
yeah, nobody. But if you go to a different, there are some places around that actually make, like I've been to a couple of falafel places, and you can tell that they actually use kind of homemade ingredients and things like that. So perhaps they might be a processed option rather than ultra processed option. But I don't know without asking them for the ingredients list or anything.
No,
so.
because normally if you're a bartender, you work until 2 o'clock in the morning, then you have a few beers, and then you go home and you have another couple of beers by yourself. And then you eat your, I don't know, kebab or whatever else. And, but before you eat your kebab or your burger, you had 7 shots, and depends on how bad your mental state is from that evening.
Oh,
But
no.
you had a few drinks
Yeah.
on an empty stomach, right?
Mm.
And then the day after, you're feeling not so great, and mentally you're down.
Mm.
Why? Well, I know why, but I
Yeah.
would like you to explain it. I can guess why.
Yeah, there's so many things that will be playing a role there. Like aside from the the obvious number one thing, there is the alcohol and the whole fact that is a toxin. Essentially, your liver is needing to process out. That is
It's a cancerogen, right? You say cancerogen in English?
carcinogen. Yeah.
Carcinogen.
So generally, when it's something like that is toxic, your liver has to prioritize getting that out, metabolizing it, turning it into something that isn't toxic to get it out of your body,
Right.
rather than working on nutrients that are coming in or not coming in if you're not eating this.
Of course, of course. Can I just ask you, what exactly is the chemical component within alcohol that it's toxic? Is it ethyl? Is it ethanol itself?
Mm.
That's considered a toxic compound.
Yeah, I guess, I don't have insight into what's
No,
in every different type, but that is the,
The
the-
baseline is ethanol is, and there might be a few more things. There are some
Depending on the
spirits that contain caramel coloring. Now that's
Okay.
is like a type of coloring at the end. It doesn't taste nothing like caramel. In fact, its actual name is, fun enough, 𝒟𝒏50A.
Mm,
Right, that's the
that's
formula
one of
they
those
use.
cosmetic ads.
It is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Anything that says E. All right. So some spirits contain that as well. But of course, all spirits and wines contain ethanol, right? Now, why is ethanol so toxic for our body?
It's just, it is, alcohol is just
So as you were explaining earlier, when we
but,
assume ethanol, right?
that gets prioritized in the liver, that means that your liver can't do, it takes up all the capacity, basically trying to sort that out so that you don't get to a toxic level of that in your body. It obviously that's the sensible thing to do, but that also means that it kind of puts on the back burner working on metabolism of nutrients that's coming for food and that sort of thing. So that's often why, for example, in alcoholics, they can often get nutritional deficiencies because that system is already taken up working on the alcohol. But something I was going to mention there with the whole situation that you described is once you get past that side of things, that obviously the food situation, if you've gone for something that is perhaps not a nutritionally optimal food option when you come home from work, then that'll be, as we spoke about, the connection between the gut and mental health. That could be playing a role there if you're eating some of those foods that are known to have those negative effects, and also not getting those healthier foods in there that are good for the gut microbes and that can make those substances that contribute to the good mental health. But also alcohol can impact sleep quality, and that is another thing that affects a lot of things. So, the day after, as you were saying, that you don't feel particularly good. And
Happy.
yeah. That will actually also possibly impact your food choices the next day. So, we know that lack of sleep can actually impact the levels of hunger and fullness hormones in the body.
Is it?
Yeah.
All
So if you have not had a lot of sleep or not had a lot of good quality sleep, then that can impact, among other things, those hormones, and then that can actually impact your choices of food later on. It can make you a bit hungrier. You might tend to snack a bit more. If you're tired as well from the night before, then you're also less, you kind of got less capacity to make more considered food choices, because we make a lot of our decisions on autopilot most of the time. And when we want to consciously choose, a healthier option, then we have to use a bit more focus, use our more conscious decision-making processes there. But if we're tired, then it's very difficult to kind of to tap into those conscious decisions. And then we often will go for whatever is the most easily available option, which might be, again, fast food or takeaways or something like that. Or the body might want to get, at the fastest possible source of energy. So going for those ultra processed foods that are high in sugar or refined fats and that sort of thing as well. So it's kind of a follow on effect that can.
But so what can a bartender do then? Because these guys, I mean, everybody knows it's bad to skip dinner and then have a lot of alcohol and then eat later. Well, first of all, can you explain me why it's unhealthy to eat at night time?
Yeah, that is really interesting one as well. So the body works on a circadian rhythm. So there's a center, it's kind of like the control center or the main sort of pacemaker clock, if you will, that is centered in the brain that controls. There's a system of little circadian clocks throughout the body in other tissues and organs and things as well. But that's the one that's in control of everything, and it's in sync with our natural daytime, nighttime routine. So when we see daylight, it comes through in through the eyes, through the retina, that signals to the center in the brain that, hey, it's daytime. We can start doing all these processes that we normally do. So we know that the body tends to be more effective at metabolizing, so breaking down certain nutrients in foods a little bit earlier in the daytime. So that's when it's most effective at those processes. So it's more ideal to eat earlier in the day. And there's actually a lot of research that links eating late in the evening or eating at night, for example, in shift workers with increased risk of some lifestyle diseases, so things like obesity, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes as well. There is thought to be, there's probably a couple of different things that are playing a role here. As you've pointed out, there's not a lot of good food options available late at night. I don't know of any really healthy ones that are open in the middle of the night. So that's probably one of the things that's really difficult, and that may play a role in the situation there. But also, I have read some literature that says that when we start to eat outside of that natural daytime, nighttime rhythm that our circadian rhythm is synced into, that can actually, although the main pacemaker clock, circadian clock, that one is still going on the normal daytime, nighttime routine, these other little network of ones that are out in the organs and tissues, they can actually, in some cases, be overridden. So if we're eating outside of those times, then we can perhaps override the routine in those ones that are actually dealing with food coming in, and liver, for example, that's metabolizing nutrients and that sort of thing. And then the system can get a bit out of sync. So one of them is on nighttime routine and the main one's on the daytime routine. And that is been suggested to be one of the reasons why things perhaps might be negative for health once things start to get a bit out of whack. That's when we start to get these health problems coming up. So yeah, it's quite amazing that all these things are going on inside that we don't know.
Yep. So what would I do? Let's say I started my shift at 4 o'clock, right? And it's 7 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
I'm hungry, but bar is busy.
Yeah.
Can't just leave and go and have dinner and come back, right?
I totally understand. It's a tricky situation, and obviously there's probably not one optimal solution there. So I think you have to kind of work with, what works. Also, things might be different for different individuals, so you have to find something that works there. But I guess one of the main tip that I give to everybody is to be prepared, try and prepare in advance. And the same applies here. If you can prepare some food or something to take with you, then that is going to help a lot, because then you know that you've got a healthier option. Also having a bit of a routine. I don't know exactly how it is I guess, it is perhaps a little bit unpredictable sometimes as to when people come in and how it's going to get busy. So you can try and have a little bit of a schedule, I guess, but you might have to throw that out the window.
Yeah. So prepare it beforehand, right? And maybe if you don't have time, earlier you were telling me maybe it's a good, it's a good idea to just have something small, even nuts or dried fruit or whatever, better than nothing, I guess.
It doesn't need to be like a full meal. And that's the other thing that I would probably suggest, is trying to stick to a mealtime routine that maybe is a little bit more similar to what you would eat if you're on a normal daytime schedule. So not eating any really huge meals in the middle of the night when your body isn't optimized to actually deal with them. So if you can, try and eat a kind of dinner meal before you start your shift. having, a kind of lighter meal in the middle if you get a break to eat in the middle of the shift. So that could be, as you said, something like nuts. You could have, a yogurt and nuts and fruit or something, or even if you are able to make like a wrap or something, I'll get a wholemeal pizza, something first, salad, some falafel. You don't have to make them yourself. There are a couple of just minimally processed options in the store as well. Hummus or something, whack it together. You've got a,
Hummus is great.
yeah, it's
Amazing. I love it.
yeah. So something like that is, pretty easy, and you can just take it with you, and yeah.
So I had a bite, right? But then it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I still have a few drinks, right? And I go home. And because this happens to me all the time, when I drink alcohol, I get hungry.
Yeah.
I need to eat. Now, is it a good idea? Or like, let's say it's like in the middle of the night. I just finished my shift. I did have a bite, right? So I was lucky. I did have a bite. I had a few drinks as well. I go home. I'm hungry because I had alcohol. Should I eat or should I just forget about it? It's just gonna get it worse. And should I just go to sleep?
I think if you're hungry and it's going to impact your sleep, then it's probably a good idea to have something at least before you go to sleep.
Right.
But it's also, the same advice applies for somebody on a normal schedule. You try not to eat really close up to your bedtime, because that can also actually impact your sleep quality. If your body's trying to digest things, then you're not going to be able to sleep so well if it's doing all these processes.
So it's rather, the question is, it's about rather you can actually sleep well or not later, right? Rather than
It's a bit of
it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's I think, you've got to think a little bit practically, and it's also, I guess, when you're finishing, what time you're home after finishing your shift, if you could fit in, for example, a small light meal that might be kind of the equivalent to a breakfast that maybe you would have at that
Right.
kind of early
Yeah.
time in the morning, then you could have that, then something smaller like I don't know, overnight oats or something with some berries and fruit.
I guess
or
the problem is when you're talking about oats and berries. I guess the problem is that when you drink alcohol, you want something fat,
I know.
heavy. You know, I'm sure.
And that's the alcohol coming in and influencing those food choices. You've got to kind of maybe take the 80-20 approach if you can.
What's the 80-20
Yeah,
approach?
that is, if you try to have, a good basis diet, good, nutritious diet with mainly minimally processed whole foods, around about 80% of the time, then if you eat, some other
20,
foods, then other
20% of the
20%.
time you have something just
There's room for that, None of us are perfect. I'm not going to sit here and say that I eat completely perfect, that I never eat any ultra processed foods, that I don't ever eat cake or ice cream or anything like that. That would be a
impossible.
lie.
Yes.
So, and it's this day and age with all the way that the food system is, it's very difficult to avoid those foods anyway, even if you tried. Like
Yeah, but I can tell, even your skin, it's so, that means you follow a great diet. And you work out as well.
I but as much as I can.
It's important.
With small kids, there's not always huge opportunities, but I try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, we are nearly to the end.
Mm-hmm.
There is just one more thing I would like to cover,
Yeah.
which is, it's a story. So I was not planning to talk about this, but it's a story that came out
You're gonna spread
earlier.
something.
No, it's a story. No, it's a story that came out earlier to my mind. So a few years ago, I was talking to a bar industry personality. He's Italian. I'm not going to mention his name for privacy reasons, but he's Italian and he's been vegan for something like 15 years or something like that, maybe longer. I don't remember exactly how long. And then I asked him about it, and I was like, and at that time I used to be a meat eater, so and for me it was really weird to talk to an Italian who is actually vegan, and so I asked him. I was like, why? And then everything I was expecting except the answer he actually gave me. He said, and I want to know what you think about this. he told me that one day he was in Singapore for a business trip, and his ear started bleeding. And then he went for a few checkups, and then he had some other issues as well. I don't remember now because it's been some years since I spoken with him. And then he went to do checkups, and then he basically found out he had some sort of cancer or something like this.
Okay.
And then he changed his diet. After he tried a few things, he changed his diet. He removed processed sugar, and he removed animal products, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been fine ever since,
Okay.
apparently. And now also there was a study in Italy where they it wasn't really to call it a study is a bit of a stretch. It's basically a journalist who went through 30 days he went 30 days vegan, and he went he did regular checkups with several doctors, and so, and some of them some of these doctors told him, look, without meat your nails are gonna fall, and your hair, you're gonna be weak, and so on. And some other doctors who actually, he was doing blood tests and so on, and he found out that his testosterone levels went up. The energy levels, they went down for the first week or 10 days, then they went up. Because he was explaining that if you follow a plant-based diet where you actually do get all the nutrients that you need, then you're fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the question I have for you is this.
Mm-hmm.
It's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
Sandra,
Yeah.
do vegans get enough protein?
Do you know what they can? But it's the same as people who eat meat. You can get good vegan diets and you can get bad vegan diets. The same as you
It's the
can
same
get
thing,
good
right?
diets that include meat and good ones and then bad ones that include So it's all about what kinds of foods you're eating, and if you know how to put together your diet in a good way. So it's perfectly possible to meet your protein requirements on a vegan diet, but it's all about understanding where you're getting those proteins from. And it's also, again, about the quality of the food. Like we were in with the ultra-processed thing. You can get loads of ultra-processed vegan foods, which you might not necessarily be eating a healthier diet if you're including lots of those. But if you're including lots of whole, minimally processed foods like your legumes, chickpeas, beans, those kind of things, tofu, tempeh. There's even some really interesting ones that I've learned about recently, actually. There's things like nutritional yeast that actually is about what's it, 40,
It's high
46?
it's high protein
Yeah.
and B12 as well.
Yeah, some of them are fortified, but if they're not fortified, then they may not actually be a source. So it's important to check whether it's
All right.
one that's been fortified. Also things like pumpkin seeds, they're surprisingly high, so about 36 grams, I think, per 100 grams. And
When
so all these
choosing
like things.
what to eat, is it useful for this? Might be stupid, by the way. Is it useful to look at the color of an ingredient?
It is for
Say tomatoes,
like
red, spinach, green, and then you have different sources of vitamins or.
that is kind of like a rule of thumb. Like it's not 100% foolproof, but basically, you might have heard the term like eat the rainbow. And the reason that a lot of us nutritionists say that is because there tends to be a bit of an association between the colors and the types of nutrients they include. And that's often also because a lot of these, we call them bioactive compounds or polyphenols and antioxidant type substances. They are often the ones that give the foods their color. So you'll know that that particular food, if it's that bright color, then it'll possibly have that particular nutrient in it. And by eating, a wide variety of different colors, then you're hopefully covering all of those nutrients that your body needs, or at least a good amount of them in any case. So, yeah.
But it's not approved strategy.
I don't think
it's
there's
a
any
knee.
huge
It's a knee.
evidence behind it, but we do know that is that these foods contain those nutrients and that sort of thing.
Right.
But it's it's more just about getting, a good variation of them in there. And if you are including plenty of different colors, then you're probably more likely to be hitting your different nutrient targets and that sort of thing. So it's a good rule of thumb to have.
All right.
Yeah.
Whew. Sandra, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.